Neff went on, we collaborated from Snoop to Wiz to Deadmau5 to Kevin Durant to, Future to, Aoki. Neff, we collaborated with all the hottest talent back in the day. And, we built amazing business that was in like 50 countries, doing over 100 million a year at retail. And
Wow.
it was a killer run. So it became, there was a good 4 or 5 years that, I could not leave my house, whether I'm driving to pick my kid up, whether I'm jumping on a flight, as I'm driving to my kid's house, I'll see something Neff, a shirt or a beanie. Then I jumped on a plane and a kid on the plane would have a Neff beanie. Then I'd land in Europe and someone would wear a Neff beanie.
I'm Tom Ward, and over the last couple of years, I've had the chance to sit down with some of the biggest celebrities and influencers in the world. What I've always found most fascinating is the stories of the businesses that they've built behind the scenes. On this show, you'll get an inside look of what it takes to build a successful business from some of the biggest celebrities, business people, and up-and-coming entrepreneurs in the world. This is The Tom Ward Show.
All right, guys, welcome to the Tom Ward Show, where we talk to the biggest entrepreneurs in the world. Today, we've got Shaun Neff, founder of Neff Headwear, Beach House Group, Beach House Ventures. Now, people might not know you or Neff Headwear, but chances are they probably know one of the brands you're associated with. You've got Base with Shay Mitchell, you got Moon Oral Care with Kendall, Jenner, and OBJ, you got Pattern Beauty, you got Florence. Now, you're a kid from California. You were making beanies with snowboarders in Utah. Now, all of a sudden, you got these brands with A-list celebrities. Could you ever imagine that you'd be kind of in these circles or in this world?
Yeah, man, I feel super blessed. It's just fun. I think that's something important for any entrepreneur. If you're lucky enough to be in a business which you genuinely love, right? And you're hyped every day to wake up and go create new things and work with amazing people. That's really where I find myself today. And I'm just it's almost a aha moment daily, right? With the people I'm interacting with, the brands that, I'm been fortunate enough to build, and it's been a wild journey. So, I'm having fun and feel blessed.
I like your story too, because influencer marketing is a thing now. You've got businesses kind of, that's your marketing strategy, right? It's a lot of businesses market strategies, influencer marketing. But when you were starting out, we're kind of from the same generation. Influencer marketing was getting the cool kid at the skateboard shop or the cool kid in your class to wear your beanie or to get your t-shirt. And that's kind of how you started, right? You printed up 30 t-shirts, and the marketing strategy, right, was to get it on the cool kids. Is that kind of where you started?
Yeah, you're spot on. Look, I grew up in California. I love surfing, skating, snowboarding. That's kind of what I was into. And at a very young age, I was super intrigued with brands, right? Like what it meant for me to be a consumer, me being a young kid that would only wear maybe a couple brands, branded t-shirt logos on my chest that I felt I wanted to get down with. Kind of my dream when I grew up was to have a surf skate snow brand. So, freshman in college, I moved up to Utah to snowboard. And literally knew nothing, had no connections in the apparel industry. The surf skate snow industry was just kind of, a surfer, snowboarder myself. And lo and behold, I printed some t-shirts, tried to register a couple other names before, and they got, kickback from the USPTO, right? And I was like, what's this? And then it was just, it was funny. I remember chilling one day, and it was when Hurley was just getting big, and I was like, yo, that guy Bob used his last name, I'll just use mine, right? Thinking that's maybe a trick to the USPTO office, because I didn't even know what even that meant. And I started it, man. I put my last name on some t-shirts, and to your point, I initially just seeded it out. I had a backpack full of t-shirts. I'd go around college, I'd show up at the parties, and I'd be trying to sell $10 t-shirts, but also if I saw the dope kid or the rad DJ, or I knew that, that's that cool kid at the skate park that rips, I'm going to give him a t-shirt, right? And it really started with just humble beginnings in a sense of knowing nothing and this hustle out of my backpack, and then I met some big pros, and I was like, hey, can you rock this t-shirt? I started hanging out with these pro snowboarders, and it was kind of crazy. They're like, yeah, I'll rock it around the house like you're a homie, but I can't wear it when I snowboard or like if I'm getting,
They got
photographed
deals,
because
right?
yeah, they're like, Burton pays me 400 grand a year. And I'm like, well, what's up with those deals? Like, what can I see one? I've never seen one. So the true story is I took home a couple of the biggest pro snowboarders in the world's contracts and I read through them and in their deliverables, it said nothing about headwear. So I kind of was like, there's no way I can now just make beanies and hats and the biggest athletes in the world can wear them because that's what's on. That's what gets all the showtime, right? Is the head. So I literally like woke up that next morning, true story, Olympic televised event that weekend. I didn't know how to make a hat or a beanie. There's screen print shops in college towns, but not hat and beanie makers. So I went to a dollar store, literally bought like 30 of the most ghetto headbands and beanies you've seen. I grabbed a Sharpie and literally wrote my last name on it, showed up to this contest and like, yo, I'm not a clothing company, was talking to agents and saying, I got headwear. I think these guys can rock it. It doesn't go against their contract. And a couple bold guys in the beginning rocked it and ended up on the podium. And that's kind of how Neff started. It was crazy.
Now, okay, I mean, it's an inspiring story, but if you even go back to when you're at the parties, right, before
Yes.
with the snowboard guys, you got to have some balls and almost kind of be a little like crazy, I guess, because you go, hey, my name's Tom Ward. Okay, here's a shirt that says Tom Ward on it. I'm an 18-year-old kid. Why the would anyone wear a shirt with my name on it, right? Who the fuck is Tom Ward? I mean, it's got to take some balls or you got to be a little kind of, off to get people to buy into that. So let me ask you the question. Why, if I'm a big snowboarder, am I going to wear something that says Shaun Neff on it? I don't know who Shaun Neff is. Like, why, how did you get them to put it on?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And look, in the beginning, I was about the same age as them all, maybe a little bit younger. I was able to snowboard myself, right? So I was up on the hill with them. I could gain some
Okay.
credibility. And at that time, right, like beanies were an afterthought for every company. Like Burton, Vans, like all the big dogs, Quicksilver made beanies, but it was more of like, we make apparel, we make boards. Oh, hurry, let's outsource. Let's get a dozen beanies from this creative agency and get them designed real quick. So I really came in. I mean, that's where I really won. Now, hence the Sharpie on the pen thing that was me having relationships, knowing these dudes. They were kind of backing me, knowing that I was like maybe a cool character that they were down with. And then eventually, right, I started making rad stuff. And I kind of created this weird vibe early, with a couple other pro snowboarders in the industry that were riding for Neff that like, it's almost like the cool, dope dudes in snowboarding were on Neff, right? So there's like pro athletes, but beyond that, if you were rocking like the Neff beanie, it kind of had a check. It's almost like the Twitter check of steez, right? Or style. Because we went after like the younger, radder kids. Like we even had a guy that, came off at a big Olympic run. And I was like, he was going on Good Morning America. And they were like, can you send him a Neff beanie? And I said, no, because I was like, I don't like how that dude, kind of dresses or rocks. Like it's not the right fit for the brand. So in the very beginning, I was lucky enough to become friends with a couple very influential snowboarders that then started rocking Neff. And it kind of created this cool vibe within the pro industry. And that's really how I convinced them to rock it. Because it was like by association, like, oh, if that dude's rocking it, he's a pro snowboarder and he's cool. I want to be a part of that movement. And it was very anti-big company and it felt very loose and young.
There's a very valuable nugget in there. You said no, where every other brand would have said yes to that Olympic kid. Hey, I'm going to be on Good Morning America. The marketing person would go, fuck yeah, give him a hat. It's going to be in front of this many eyeballs. We're going to sell this many beanies. Of course you get it on him. Who cares how he dresses? Who cares if he's the right vibe or not? But you said no. I mean, did you have a ton of sales at this time? Did you?
Oh, no.
How did
At
you have the
that
balls
time,
to say no to that?
yeah, we maybe would have been in maybe a couple like local mom and pop, like core skate shops, but right in surf skate snow with, sneaker fashion, that same kind of industry, it's all about like being exclusive. You don't want to over, brand yourself. You don't want to be in the wrong store. So like, even at that time, I was so content in the journey because I knew I was brand building, not knowing what brand building is today and what I know today. I just knew that, like, okay, if I'm going to continue putting pro snowboarders on this, and in the beginning, not paying them, just sending them $10 beanies and they're rocking them, like, it has to have tie into some cachet, cool factor. So I was literally running on the brink of, if the wrong person's rocking it, that doesn't maybe fit the style, or if I end up in the wrong store at the wrong time, I knew I'd be over, right? Because I didn't have money to back me up. I didn't have anything but the right people rocking it, boosting this brand. So like, at a very young age, not understanding the details of any of that, of what I know today, I literally knew that, like, if in that very instant, if the wrong guy pro was kind of saying, oh yeah, I'm on Neff now, then it could have deterred everyone else rocking it, right? So it was a weird time. So that's what I was so focused on, just having it in the right hands.
That's so true. And it applies even more today with influencer marketing, right? Who you align yourself with. It's easy to get fooled by metrics sometimes. It's like, well, this person has 10 million followers. Of course we want to get it to him. But it's just to your point, like the kid on Good Morning America. Yeah, okay, cool. They've got a ton of eyeballs on them, but are they the right ones that we really want? Maybe the smarter move is to get it in the hands of somebody with 10,000 followers, but but that's the right person with the right vibe. That's kind of that jives with what we're saying. Like, is that your message to, because young entrepreneurs or brand builders watch this stuff, and everybody's got their own, whether they're building a PR firm or they've got a t-shirt company or whatever, influencer marketing is tied to that. You want to get your product in the right people's hands. Is that the lesson for them, is not to just get blinded by the numbers and to stay true?
Yeah, in the very beginning, like, in my opinion, right, building brands is storytelling, right? And like, for me, you're, as a company, you make product, right? You have to win by making incredible product. It's got to be product that, you don't have to reinvent the wheel or create a new category, but it's got to be different a little bit, right? Because if you're like thinking a big retailer, how are you going to go in and be like, hey, here's my brand, you need this? And they're like, well, we already have this brand that does exactly what you do on the shelf. Like, you got to come with some point of difference. So that's like, the base scenario is great product, right? And then it comes to like, okay, how are you going to let consumers know? And for me, I've built a career on aligning with amazing people that can be authentic to that storytelling, right? And it's I think it's crucial, right? It's knowing who you are, knowing where you want to end, right? Like, even in the early days of Neff, I knew I had to get a foothold in some market, right? And I moved up to Utah to snowboard, so I was around pro snowboarders. I always laugh, like, if I would have like went to school in like Hawaii, maybe Neff would have started in surfing and not snowboarding, right? Because I wasn't really like, oh, I have to start a snowboard brand. It's just where I was. So I found my way to that product. And I knew initially, for me to tap into a smaller market, a more core market, influential market, I was able to start small, getting through snow. And then to your point, I knew the end, I wanted to be a big consumer brand, right? So, and wanted to hit kids across the world. So I did the snow surf skate thing for a couple years, rooted credibility. Being a niche in headwear allowed me to call the Burton guy in SoCal, and he's like the biggest rep that does San Diego to LA. And I was like, hey, you don't have a headwear company. And he's like, you're right. So I found this little niche. So now he's walking in showing Burton, then he pulls out a Neff bag of beanies and hits every store, right? So there was so many value of coming in with a niche product, a product where it didn't exist. Like, a headwear company did not exist in surf skate before I did, right?
Crazy.
And it was finding that pocket to get in. But then I knew, once I had traction in that world, I was like, okay, I got to hit the next layer, right? And I was lucky enough was working with a big retailer. They connected me in with a good friend of mine, a guy named Nick Adler now, who was Snoop's guy, right? So like, my first big collaboration, who knows how, I was maybe 4 or 5 years into Neff, I did a big deal with Snoop, right? So I sat with Snoop. That was my I knew I had to get out, like Surf Skate Snow had a market size on it, right? And I knew, okay, if I'm going to hit all the kids, I need to hit big talent, big athletes. And really, you know, I met with Snoop, did this crazy deal. I'll never forget it. I was young and I met him and I'm in a room and I'm like, you know, 6 years ago, I was in high school listening to this guy. Like, how am I sitting in front of him right now? My mind's just blown. And then we did this little deal, and I'm like, let's do this little like Neff dog shirt, and I'll create you your own dog. And literally, like 6 days later, he was performing at the VMAs. And back then, the VMAs was like the biggest thing ever for us, right? It was like when culture and music, and I mean, there was only one way. It's like there was no social media. It was like you watch the VMAs to see what is cool. And he performed with Katy Perry, and out comes Snoop with a big Neff shirt with the big dog. And that was like, you know, just how I got that hit in the surf skate snow industry with guys. That was my first hit with big talent. And then I went to like Zoomies and was like, yo, I just did this. And then they bought a bunch of shirts. And then, you know, Neff went on, we collaborated from Snoop to Wiz to Deadmau5 to Kevin Durant to, you know, Future to, I mean, Aoki. Like, I mean, Neff, we collaborated with all the hottest talent back in the day. And, you know, we built amazing business that was in like 50 countries, you know, doing over 100 million a year at retail. And wow. it was a killer run. So like, you know, it became, I mean, there was a good 4 or 5 years that, I mean, I could not leave my house, whether I'm driving to pick my kid up, whether I'm jumping on a flight, whether, I mean, as I'm driving to my kid's house, like I'll see something Neff, a shirt or a beanie. Then I jumped on a plane and a kid on the plane would have a Neff beanie. Then I'd land in Europe and someone would wear a Neff beanie. So there was a moment where like we were selling, and look, we were selling beanies, right? Like our daily beanie was just crazy. We were selling millions of those every year. And, you know, even for Zoomies, like we were up against Vans, DC, all the biggest companies. And at one point, you know, the Neff beanie was selling more units than all of them, right? Like per unit. So it was pretty crazy. It was a fun run. And that's kind of where I cut my teeth, right? In working with talent, because Neff was all dropping collabs daily.
So it seems like, you know, you're the master networker, I mean, of all time. I mean, just to go back to that first meeting with Snoop, okay. I mean, once you do this for a while, you get less and less starstruck the more you're around, and it just becomes people, like almost like coworkers, right? But in the beginning, you're there with Snoop, you just listened to him. Now all of a sudden, he's gonna wear your product, which is wild because you were just buying them at the thrift store a couple years, or at the dollar store a couple years ago. Now all of a sudden you got Snoop, a guy you listen to and love. You're collaborating, putting, you know, something together. How do you get in a room with those guys early on? Like, what made you successful? And even fast forward to now, I mean, a Shay Mitchell can work with anybody. Anybody wants to be in the celebrity business brand, right? So why do these people keep coming back to you over and over again for 20 years? I mean, what makes you different, and what can we learn from you?
Yeah, look, in the beginning, I mean, the very beginning, it was just the audacity of like, I'm going to meet this person. Or if it's not that person, it's the manager. And if it's not the manager, it's the manager's friend. And I mean, I have so many stories where I'm like buy a general admission ticket to see an artist. And then I literally somehow sneak in from general admission to like the floor. And then I'm not even watching the concert. I'm literally watching people walking in and out with badges. So I'm like, who were they? Like, they're obviously dipping in and out. And then you can see the difference of like, okay, there's people that work in the arena, but then there's people that are probably with the artist, right? So like, I'm watching them. So when they're over here in the side where I can reach to them, I'm running up and like, yo, what up? Are you with, you know, are you with so-and-so? And they're like, well, yeah, actually I do this and this. And it's like, you know, and whatever the story is, I went through a gazillion stories of like, yo, you know, my dude Larry, who's tight with him, just told me to roll back. Is that cool? He's like, oh, Larry, huh? Then I try to like walk back with him, right? Or else if I see 6 people walking, I'm literally like going with the 6 acting to just keep my head down, like keep it moving. I kid you not, in the and times where I'm just waiting or going to events, knowing that someone's going to be there and a manager of someone's going to be there. and I'll sit in a room knowing nobody for 4 or 5 hours waiting for that 10 minutes I might get with that guy to just spit like what I'm doing, right? So in the beginning, it's just an absolute hustle for me. I mean, even down to the pro snowboarders, spending time with them and like, you know, chasing it around movie premieres, sitting here with this guy, driving this guy to the next place, and like, hey, you guys can jump in my car. I'll be your like driver tonight or whatever. Like whatever it was, right? Because I had no relationships in the beginning. And then as I started like getting, you know, one, then you have a little cred, then the brand started going, right? And it slowly started opening doors, right? So from like Neff was kind of the first hurrah, whereas Neff got scale and it became a brand that even like out of nowhere, like in the beginning, like Lil Wayne just came out in like the Lollipop video wearing like a Neff beanie, and I didn't even give it
Oh,
to him,
wow.
right? So like there's a lot of people when I started getting momentum, they started wearing Neff, right? So as soon as I had luckily caught a glimpse of culture, right, where people started saying, oh, Neff's kind of this cool brand, it's a cool beanie, I just was relentless, like 28, you know, 10 hours a day, just going to any place where I knew talent would be. Because that's just what I was always a believer of, is I still looked at talent and I'm still intrigued, and I love the vibe, and they're creators and they're amazing people. And I'm just such a fan how they've built their followings. And I've always just been, as a consumer products guy, like, wow, if I can create a product and it's authentic for that person to endorse it or talk about it, I want to know them and be in their circles, right? So obviously it got easier as like, you know, I did Neff, and then while I was at Neff, I was still like, Sony Electronics hired me to be their youth advisor, right? So I was advising Sony on like colors and how the youth think, and right, because Neff was in every youth retailer in the country and we were like a top brand. And then that was interesting because through those relationships, I met artists through Sony, and I'd be in like, you know, different, being able to meet new people from that arm. And then it was like, Target hired me a couple years back when, you know, the private label brands used to be Sean White, Massimo, and Cherokee. And they hired me to help them kind of, as those brands were getting removed, help them build their internal youth brands, right? So that was advising them like colorways, feels, look of product, did that. So I was always like doing other stuff with bigger brands to kind of help the credibility, which then opened some pretty cool relationships. And then, you know, I never stayed complacent, right? Like even, you know, another fun brand that I didn't start, but at the time, craziest story, and sorry if I'm riffing too much,
No, this is good.
You can cut me out. But another crazy story was, I had a friend in Florida and his neighbor walked by, and my buddy had a Neff sticker on his car. So this guy walked by and was like, oh, Neff, that's dope. Like, you like that brand too? And my buddy was like, oh, that's my buddy Shaun from college. Like, he's a good buddy of mine. Yeah, like he makes rad stuff, but I've known him forever. And then the guy was like, oh, I'd love to talk to him. I've got, you know, a sunscreen brand right now and we need some help. And so they connected me, and my buddy called me and was like, hey, you want to talk to this guy? And I was like, all right, whatever. I'm always down to talk to whoever, right? Like, I'm the one that, like, I don't judge. If anyone wants to vibe, I'll vibe. Like, my idea is no better than anyone else's. Like, you know, you always have the conversation. You never know where it leads. And I had this call, and this guy was like, hey, here's where we're at. We're in a tough spot. We're running out of capital. And, you know, at the time the business was small, maybe just, you know, not in too many stores. And basically I ended up doing some diligence, thought this was cool. They were coming to me because they were trying to go the surf skate snow route initially. So they thought I could help them there. And in the end, I helped, based on my relationships working with Target, I helped walk them in to Target, the brand, right? And at the time they were running out of money. So I wrote a check, right? I invested in it. At that time became the second largest shareholder of the business. And look, like, I don't take credit for everything, right? Because it wasn't my day job. Amazing people were hired. The brand went off and was credible. But, you know, if I didn't write that check, this company probably good chance it would have been out of business, right? And that business was Sunbum, the sunscreen company.
Wow.
And we sold that to SC Johnson right before COVID, right? So that was insane, right? So like that was just an amazing ride, another amazing exit for me personally, which, you know, was incredible. And so like I go and I'm riffing a lot now, right? Because, you know, I was an advisor to Beju and Vlad at Robinhood in the beginning. And like, so I'd always get my fingers in the right things and kind of be like a phone call away where like, if someone needs brand help or regardless of the category or marketing or go to market, I'm always the guy that says, I love to find little fires and I'm the gas pourer, right? That helps stuff accelerate. So now, right, like just based on all the hustle and different projects, right, from apparel to sunscreen to working with some of the biggest retailers and companies in the world to, you know, like a wide background, I was at this spot where, you know, like people start hearing about the couple of little things you've done, they start connecting dots, and you start earning a little bit of trust, right? Or like, hey, you should meet my friend, or hey, you mean that's the Shay, you brought up Shay Mitchell. It was through a buddy of mine who's a big a producer in Hollywood. He's like, hey, Shay was originally looking at a nail salon business, and he said, you should talk to Shay and see if you want to be a part of this nail salon thing or give her some advice. And that's how we met. And then Shay and I just brainstormed on a bunch of different things. And, you know, it was like, hey, nail salon's probably not the right thing. Went through a couple other ideas and then landed, you know, with her creating Base, right? Which was authentic to her. She was doing Shaycations. And, you know,
Okay.
so I've been able to kind of like, based on past successes, have, you know, a little bit of trust. And that's kind of the game now I'm playing, right? Is constantly meeting with people with no expectations. I'm down to always vibe out first and give some advice. And maybe it's good advice, bad advice, whatever it is, but we'll riff. And then if there's something to do, cool. If not, cool.
You know, it's wild. And I love that story. And I probably interviewed over 200 people, right? Successful people from kind of all walks of life. And I'm wired like you. And I think what almost every one of them has in common is the same thing, is the hustle. So I'm like you. I'll sit in that concert for 4 hours and figure out who's the guy to get me backstage to see the guy that I want to see, right? I'll somehow, and I didn't learn that in college, and I didn't have a mentor teach me that. It's just in the air somewhere. You just kind of have that, or you don't, I think. And I think that's the thing that almost everyone I've talked to, regardless of whether they're an influencer or they're a tech startup person, whatever, has that. Now, every one of them has a different skill set, right? You have a different skill set than maybe the tech startup guy who's more of an engineer that I talked to last week, right?
Yeah.
But all of you share that same thing. And as you're advising people, and I'm sure startup founders are coming to you all the time and pitching ideas or asking for advice or asking to be their mentor and stuff. Is that the most important thing you think when starting a business, is to have that intrinsic hustle, quote unquote, whatever that means, but that drive and that ability to kind of figure things out and find the right people or connect with the right people, or really at the end of the day, it's all relationships, is kind of what you just talked about for the last 10 minutes. Is that the most important thing you think when launching a business or succeeding as a business person?
Yeah, look, I do. Without that, you're never going to be able to achieve the finish line, right? It's like running a marathon. It's not easy. You got to train. And there's a gazillion moments where you're like, I'm over this, right? But you're not going to get that check that you completed the race unless you keep going, right? And for me, I always say there's kind of three things that I kind of vibe out on. And, you know, when talking to entrepreneurs, and it's dream, believe, and hustle, right? Those are kind of the three things I always talk about. And look, it's got to start with great product and a good idea. Because if you have those other three things without a great product and a great idea, I mean, and once you have great product, great idea, you have to have great team to execute, right? So like those are like
Yeah.
And the way I look at it is, look, to be successful running any business, great product and a great team to execute, right? It's not about yourself. I look at my career and it's just so crazy, right? Because in the beginning you feel like, oh, I'm Neff, I'm Shaun Neff, like, wow, like I'm just running around, I'm CEO, I'm reading Jack Welch books, thinking like, oh, when I'm 40, I'm gonna be a powerful CEO, right? And like I'm in every meeting, I'm in like there wouldn't be a meeting at Neff, right? Even at our peak when we had a ton of employees globally, and it was like I'd be, oh, there's a meeting about the tax-free bonded warehouse in Rotterdam. Like I gotta be in there, right? And like and I'd be talking in it, right? Which like makes no sense for me. I have no skill base and would add no value. But back then I was like, there was no way we would have gotten in that warehouse if I wasn't in that meeting, right? So you learn, right? So like now it's so crazy because I've learned my superpower. I learned what I'm great at. And I'm so grateful for the people that are around me, right? And people that have different skill sets. And I mean, that's how you win, right? So sorry, that was a spiral, but I think
No.
back to the dream, believe, and hustle. Like, look, you got to be a dreamer. You got to dream of something that doesn't exist. You got to dream of, an existing product you like that you're going to tell a different story. You got to dream up a different, product tweak, whatever it is, right? So it's got to start with that dream, and then it's believe, right? Because it's easy to dream up ideas, but if very few people really believe in themselves, like all in belief, like, and look, and I always tell I think younger entrepreneurs are the best ever, right? Like I look at when I started my first business, what allowed me to win was I knew nothing. I had no skill set. I knew not even how a business works. I didn't even know like how to, ship something. I didn't know how to create something on a computer. I didn't know. I mean, I knew nothing, right? And I think that, but I had this dream and I had this belief in myself that like, if they're doing it, I'm going to do it. Like, why wouldn't I? Right? Like there always needs to be, and it wasn't an ego thing, right? I've met enough people that are just like, they think nothing can fail when they're touching it, right? That wasn't my vibe at all. I just literally was like, just so gung-ho, and I had such this power of like, I'm just going to do this. Like, I never thought I wasn't going to do it. I never thought I shouldn't be selling beanies. I never thought I shouldn't have used my last name to start a company. So like, even down to like, we showed up at our first trade show. I love this story. SIA, Sports Industries of America. It's in Vegas. Huge trade show. It's every, action sports brand in the world's there. I call up the guy and I'm like, yo, this is Shaun Neff from Neff. And he's like, huh? Like, what? You haven't heard of the Neff brand? No, right? And at the time, we were in probably like, I don't know, 10 or 15 stores, but I had the biggest. I was like, wait, so you're representing the snow industry and you haven't even heard of Neff? Like, you're crazy. Have you heard of these athletes? Right? So I went down like 20 athletes. He's like, of course I've heard of those athletes. Those are some of the biggest athletes in the world. I said, yeah, they all ride for Neff. Really? You have them all? I said, yep. Here, I'll send you an email of a poster I have with their names on it. So it was just this funny, like vibe. And then I was like, so we need to be at the trade show. We're going to come with a bunch of kids. A bunch of the athletes are coming. They're all going to be hanging out at our booth. So like, we're not some corporate company that's going to be loaded up with sales guys. We're actually going to have pro snowboarders hanging out and have a vibe. So we need a good spot, right? I don't want to be small. He said, well, what size of booth, right? I was like, what's the smallest booth you have? How much do these things cost, right? So whatever. So the 10 by 10 was the smallest booth. And in this conversation, I ended up convincing him that we needed a great spot. So he put us right next to Burton. There was a kiddie court where he's like, there's kind of this exit aisle and this pole. The pole might be in your booth a little bit, but literally it's right next to Burton, and they spend a couple $1 million a year on their booth. I'm like, perfect. That's exactly where we need to be. And then I hung up, right? And I was like, crap, I need a trade show booth, right? So, and Halloween had just ended. So I'm like, I was just at this Halloween like haunted house. They had a bunch of walls. So I drove down there. I'm like, hey, I see these like walls. I need a 10 by 10. How much, I'll give you $200 if you just cut me a 10 by 10 of these walls and load it in my truck. He's like, cool. So I literally like our trade show booth. I went to a haunted house. They cut a 10 by 10 thing and that was my booth. Right. So like, there was just this audacity of trying to make sure that I get to the right spot, but right, like not knowing what I know now, I would never show up with a $50, $100 trade show booth that's from a haunted house. But me not understanding anything and just having belief in what I'm doing, we showed up with the worst ever looking tiny booth, but we had all the rad pro snowboarders hanging out with us. And, we left that show getting sales reps across the country and hundreds of retailers, right? And it was just this like, that's why I love the youngness of entrepreneurs, because the less you know, the less you're bogged down with what's your business plan, or how much capital is this going to take for you to operate over the next 12 to 18 months, or what's going to happen when you can't do this, you run into the I didn't even know enough to even know what could have happened running a business. And that's why I succeeded. So that's why I always just like dream, believe, and then like you said, hustle. Like the hustle is like ridiculous. Like it doesn't stop for anyone. Even if you're, you can think some of the biggest, the Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos of the world, they're still hustling. Like it doesn't matter. Like that's just got to be the magic formula, to your point of like, without the hustle, I don't think you get there, but it's got to be intertwined with a lot of things, right? Because it's just
For sure.
it's not easy and not certain.
And it's funny, the belief is such a good point too. And it's almost, and you're right, it's not an ego thing. It's not because I know that energy too. It's like, look at me, I'm the greatest. It's almost like a fighter mentality. Like that
Yes.
boxer needs that kind of, needs a different thing, needs that ego. Look at me, I'm the greatest. It's not that energy. It's something else. It's of course, like, why wouldn't I succeed at this? Like, of course I would. You know what I mean? And I have that too. It's like when I quit my job, a corporate job, it's like, of course people would want to see me talk to people. Like, how could they not? With no evidence of that at all, no training or anything. It's like, of course why wouldn't interesting people want to talk to me about it? You know what I mean? And it's just, I don't know where that comes from. And it's not, like you said, it's not the look at me, look at my chain, look at my car. It's not that energy. It's something else. It's more pure, I would think.
Yeah, you're spot on. It's like, it's just like a self-belief in a way that like, and I think you kind of have to have that and you have to buy into it, right? Like yourself, because, and that's for anyone, right? Like a musician, artist, athlete, entrepreneur. Like I even look at my, kids that are playing tennis or surfing, and it's like, you have to believe in yourself, right? Like if you don't believe in yourself, no one else is going to do it for you. And there's a difference of being like, to your point, cocky, look at me, that's a bad vibe. Like if you come out, like I've never thought that I've been really special. And I've been lucky, I've been blessed. Like I think, I'm just like, man, thank the man upstairs for everything that I've been blessed with and like the lucky situations he's put in front of me. So and I feel like the older I get and the more successful I become, the more humble and grateful you become, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, I think believing in yourself is everything, because look, when I started, ain't nobody like the best venture capitalist in the world, or, the guy that can spot something from a mile away. He would have never looked at me and been like, oh yeah, like Shaun Neff. Yep. Like I could tell by the way he's dressed today, or I can tell by what he knows or the people he knows, or I can just tell that guy is going to do a really cool lifestyle clothing brand. And then he's going to go fund the sunscreen brand. And then he like zero chance. Right. And I didn't even think of myself as being able to do all these things, but I was hyper focused on getting the right, because once you have the first win and then maybe the second win, and then maybe you sell your third or fourth company, right, you start just gaining some credibility and people want to play, but it's never easy, right? You have to, it's the never ending grind. And you know, the belief starts it, and then it turns a little bit into, you know, you got to still believe, but then I think it's your histories, your successes are now what takes over a little bit of the belief for others, right? Because in the beginning, you have to believe in yourself, because
when no one
no one
else
else
will.
is going to believe in you. And then I think as you are lucky enough to buy into your own belief and hopefully become successful, then other people are not going to buy into what you believe. They're going to buy into your history, right? Your past wins and what you've done. And that's where I think that's the progression of a career, right? Is you hope to put some points on the board, and you hope to stay humble, and you hope to realize that it's not about you. It's just about the little thing that you bring to the table. And, you know, it's like our company Beach House, which we'll probably get into, is like,
Yeah.
that's a great scenario of, I know what I do, and there's a ton of amazing people around me and other brand founders that are incredible. And I'm lucky to be a part of something like that.
So that's a great transition, right? So let's go back to Shay for a second, okay?
Yeah.
So you've got Beach House, right? So you've got all these brands, right? But before you meet Shay, she wants to do a nail salon. You go, well, it's maybe not the best in my experience. I'm thinking this. When you sit down, what's that brainstorming session like? Like, how do you decide travel is the thing for Shay? Like, how do you guys come up with that? And why was that the right answer for her?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Beach House, just to put some context on it, Beach House really got going to what it is today about 4.5 years ago, right? Because basically, even pre me coming to Beach House was a different company. It was working with like Target and helping them create product, right? So like Target would be like, hey, we need paper plates, or we need whatever, right? So my partner today, PJ in Beach House, they had a machine that was very good at making product, right? So we got connected from, you know, people at Target, a bunch of people that were like, hey, you should meet PJ because Shaun, you're the connector, you're the brand guy, you're the ideator, and PJ has a pretty good machine that makes product. So I met him, and it was interesting because it was like, at the time they were making product for a retailer. And I said, look, I had just sold a couple companies, knew a bunch of talent. I was trying to figure out, I'm always starting new things and just being me. But I was like, I want to really sink my teeth into that next big empire and try to build something pretty special. So we connected, we vibed, and it was like, the idea was, let's stop doing what Beach House is doing today. Like, that model is done. So we kiboshed that model.
Okay.
But I said, you have incredible people here. You have an amazing, you have a great creative team. You got a great marketing team. You've got a great sales team. You've got really good workers that seem intrigued, and good product design. And I said, so I'll join the party, right? So I became a major shareholder, bought out some of the old guys, did a bunch of stuff to set Beach House. And about 4.5 years ago, we made the transition right into what Beach House is today, which is, let's go build brands, right? And basically what I saw was, here's a machine that I can bring ideas and talent and brands. So I can, once again, my superpower is ideation, tying into talent and creating companies. So I'll help come up with the ideas, set the North Star, like, this is how the brand feels and operates. Here's the product, pricing strategy, right? And then we dip it into our shared service model. We hire a team and it goes. So that's just the context, right? So I met Shay probably like a couple months after we solidified Beach House, right? And kind of pivoted, and I became a part of Beach House. And it was interesting because now Beach House is just doing beauty, right? So I'll go through the brands, but it was primarily always going to be just beauty lifestyle. And I was fortunate enough to meet Shay. And look, I'll give Shay all the credit. you know, with her landing on travel and base. And I think the obvious in the brainstorm as we went through a bunch of things was she was doing Shaycations, right? So like that was kind of a channel or concept she was doing on her YouTube. It was authentic to her audience. She was getting paid to travel the world. And she was already had a very important voice, right, in travel. So it was pretty cool and interesting that, you know, we were vibing. I was telling her about Beach House, said, come in, like, this is what we're doing now. We're going to create brands. I mean, we've got the teams that can stand these up. And travel just was a perfect riff based on what she was already doing in her life. She'd already built an audience that trusted her outside of her being an amazing actress. They trusted her in travel. So it's like, hey, you know, Shay was like, it needs to be a travel company. It makes sense, right? And we went, right? So then that's the Beach House model, is we let amazing people like Shay kind of riff, come up with amazing ideas like Base. And then what we do now is we fund those companies, we put together the teams. So we put together the operator, the whole team. And then, you know, Shay's incredible. Not every entrepreneur or talent is the same, but beyond Shay being authentic to travel, she has incredible sense of design and taste and down to the details of that whole business. I mean, she now just works with our team, and even the little pockets and the waterproof, every little feature that bag has is Shay Mitchell, right? So it was just a perfect match that we were able to take her vision and her, you know, quality of knowledge around what travel needs to look like now for the future. And, you know, we're able to stand those businesses up, operate them, and scale them. So that's basically what we've done at Beach House. And, you know, it's been an incredible ride thus to this point.
Was Base the first brand you guys launched after you kind of came on board
Yep.
and tweaked the company? That was the first one you guys did?
Yep, Base was
And
first.
what was next? Was it Moon
We
Oral
did
Care?
we did Florence. So we did Florence by Mills. So we met Millie Bobby Brown, the Stranger Things, right?
Oh yeah.
Talent. We met her when she was young, maybe 13 or 14, met with her family. We had very good relationships with Ulta, the beauty retailer. So, you know, we basically met with her. Ulta wanted a clean beauty business with clean ingredients. We're like, we just met Millie. She's incredible. She's a unicorn talent. She's young. She's sophisticated. She knows what she wants to do. So we ended up creating Florence by Mills with Millie Bobby Brown. And once again, right, it's her vision, her idea, she names it. And merely at Beach House, what we try to do is let amazing humans, let talent kind of help them create their dream business, right? And our vetting process is crazy, right? Like, we've only done 4 businesses, and I've personally met with over 150 talent, right? And
Wow.
mega talent, right? People with 200 million plus followers on Instagram that we sit with, and we're so selective, right? Because number one, it's not easy to start a business, generally ever. When there's talent involved, it's almost tougher, right? Because it's got to be authentic. It needs to feel like, why are you starting this business? Like, does it make sense? Why did, you know? So for us, you know, it's finding unicorns. Like, we found Millie, and we did Florence, that we ended up selling back to her family in a fund. And then we did Moon, was kind of just an ideation I had of walking the aisle at Target and Walmart and going, oral care aisle is the ugliest aisle on the floor. It's still red, white, and blue. It's the same stuff I've seen since I was a kid. Like, no one's talking about or has a product that can sit next to a Chanel bottle or have any thought of aesthetics. So it was like, let's create Moon. And it's not just oral care. We want to call it oral beauty. I mean, we really started with Moon the whole new trend of oral beauty, right? Like, no one used to say oral beauty before we created Moon. So we created this incredible product. Hence, not all businesses start the same, right? Like, Base really started with Shay and her idea, Millie, her business, right? Moon was kind of more me vibing and ideating. And then I knew Kendall and Kylie, you know, from back in the day when I collabed with Neff I did a little beanie collab back in the day with them when they were like 13 and 14, like the Pac Sun. And then so I went over, sat with Kendall at her house, showed her Moon. She loved it. So she became kind of my like a co-founder partner in launching the Moon business. And we recently just brought on OBJ to kind of hit that other demo, you know, more the men consumer. So everyone's a little bit different than like Tracy Ellis Ross, who's an absolute unicorn. You know, she had been trying to do her business forever, right? A hair care business. And we were the lucky partner that she ended up choosing to make her vision come true, right? So once again, like Tracy's an amazing human, an amazing entrepreneur, has amazing vision, understands product. And we're merely trying to assemble the best team ever for her, and, you know, let her scale her business, and we can fund and operate it and sell it globally, right? So that's Beach House has been on this crazy tear, working with amazing humans, great talent. Our internal team's incredible. I mean, you know, the inbound now that we've built these brands, they're all doing very well, all very successful, winning awards, top of their class in all the categories at the Ultas, at Sephora's, and you know, the Boots in the UK, Douglas is right at the world. So we're kind of in this fun spot, right? And we're working on a new brand right now that I'm ideating, this fragrance brand that's going to drop next year, that doesn't have talent attached. It's just a pretty cool disruptive brand. And then we just launched Beach House Ventures, which is exciting from a standpoint that we're not just going to just start everything from scratch, right? It's like, you know, I was talking to PJ, I'm like, I've seen it both ways and it's incredible, right? Like one, building Neff was awesome, but then also finding the nugget of Sunbum and it being able to fund that was incredible as well, right? So that's really the plan for Beach House Ventures is to find amazing founders that have been around for a couple years, that are just, you know, getting going, get traction, and we want to, you know, become their partner, help them operate the business, fund it, and scale it globally. So that's kind of Beach House in a nutshell in that journey.
It's incredible. But you said something too. I always want to go back to kind of Moon Oral Care, right? Or oral beauty, as you called it, right? And you're right. I haven't heard that. I never heard that before. So you were saying you did a deal back with the girls at Neff when they were 13 years old. Now, the Jenner Kardashians get a bad rap. Well, they're just famous for being famous and all this other stuff, right? I look at them as all successful entrepreneurs in their own right. And there's plenty of people, you know, who are famous who don't do anything, right? Who don't take that and launch companies and stuff. What makes Kendall different, right? What makes her a good entrepreneur, and where you go? Because this is a good example of, well, this wasn't a Shay thing. This didn't start with, you know, her starting a, you know, oral beauty brand. This was kind of my idea and I went to her. So what makes her special? Why bring something to her? What makes her a good entrepreneur?
Yeah, and look, I think it was for Kendall, it was at the root of what we were trying to achieve with Moon, right? Which was style, aesthetic, appreciation of design, you know, and going that kind of fashiony route, right? And it's like Kendall Jenner's probably the biggest supermodel in the world. She's got a great sense of design, fashion, taste. So she was just the perfect person to work with on Moon, right? Is we're trying to disrupt an industry and come out of this stale, you know, poorly looking created product, that we wanted to come out with something that is unique and different and special and looks great on a shelf. It just felt like Kendall could be a perfect match to that business for that reason, right? It's kind of like she's cool, she's young, she's hip. People look at her as like, you know, appreciating and having well-designed cool things, and she works with the biggest fashion brands in the world. And it's kind of like this, you know, idea, and you know, it's funny, when I was trying to create Moon, it was like my brain works in weird ways, but I was like, if Chanel and Apple had a baby and it was in toothpaste, it'd be called Moon. And that's kind of how the whole thing started. And but I think about that, right? And you're just kind of like that vibe and fashion, cosign. Kendall just felt perfect. She hadn't done a business before. I knew she was looking for something to do. Her sisters have all had some amazing companies. So it was just like the right time for her. Her audience at the time wasn't being, showed 3 or 4 companies she's trying to do, which a lot of talent fall into that bucket. So a lot of things aligned, right? Like it's crazy when that's always the biggest question I get is like, hey, talent, like, how do you choose them? Or why do you want to work
Yeah,
with
sure.
You can't even, it is like vibe. It's, do they want to work hard? It's aesthetic, authenticity. So, I mean, it's a million things where literally we spend a lot of time and energy on these ideas with talent. And, for us, we've only chosen to do very few over the last 4 years. And that looks to be our cadence, right? Is there one unicorn like opportunity with talent? Probably every 12 to 18 months, we might find something that we think makes sense, because generally in celebrity type brands, it's tough to not just get a quick win out the gate and tap into their audience and then have it fizzle. That happens to 99% of them. So we make sure that they're businesses that can stand alone, and the market needs them, not just, regardless of talent. We feel that every brand we've started, the market actually needed this, even without talent or a big celebrity. So that allows us to know that that business model is sound and we have a good chance of winning. And then finding the right partner and working with someone that has an amazing voice that could tell a story that's authentic. That's just been our secret sauce.
Well, you said before, right? It starts with product. There's got to be something, like you said in the beginning of the interview, right? You can't go to Target and go, hey, I got this product. Okay, great. We already have, a much bigger company that sells us the same exact produt. Why am I going to return your phone call, right? So it's got to start with that. I just want to ask you on one more on the talent side. What's OBJ like as to work with? Because I don't even like football. I'm a basketball guy. But I'm an OBJ guy. He just seems like a cool dude. And I follow him on LinkedIn of all places. And his business content is strong. Shout out to OBJ on LinkedIn. If you don't follow him over there. He seems like he's a pretty sharp dude.
He's great, man. Hence the reason you like him is why we wanted to go after him, right? Is he's just so cool.
Yeah.
He's got such an aura of like radness around him. He dresses well. He's got the right friends. It's just kind of a guy you're like from afar, you're like, oh man, I want to get to know that guy. Or like,
for sure.
He's just so special. I mean, an incredible athlete, amazing football player. And I would accredit to him. He's smart and understands where he is and understands the platform he has. And he's got, his partner, OBJ, that we work with, and they've got a good team, man. So like, I think O is business driven. He likes, obviously he's a football player and he gets into fashion stuff, but I mean, he's smart. He wants to build businesses. He wants to scale. He wants to, have success outside of football. And I think he's one of those rare unicorns that's going to pull it off.
Nice. So we're almost out of time. What advice do you have for the kid watching this, the young entrepreneur who needs funding? So that's kind of the business you're in now, is not saying that you would invest in this person watching, but someone who has an idea and needs 10 grand or 100 grand to kind of take the next step or to really get the thing off the ground. And they don't have a rich family and they don't know VCs. Like, do you have any advice for them on kind of how to go about it?
Yeah, look, what I would say is, to start an actual company, right? It's all, you want to put, proof is in the pudding, right? You want to create and build something that is smart, or put a couple sales on the board. So in the beginning, I mean, look, if you want to like make a new, electric car company or something, we got to raise ridiculous cash. Like, good luck. I don't know what the advice for you would be, but generally a business, right? Like, to set it up, to get it trademarked, to get it going, you're going to need, who knows, $5,000 to $10,000, like you said, to maybe get your business going. So in the beginning, obviously, like, a lot of kids, I would say, is one, it's better if you can create it yourself, right? So you can go get a job, you can hustle during the day and work 10 hours, save that money up and put it right into your own business, right? Like that would be the first starting point, is how can you go out and actually work another trade that might not be what you want to do in the end, but it gets you that seed capital. Two would be like friends and family, right? Like generally, and it comes with a good idea, right? Like I think being smart about whether it's the materials you put together or it's bootstrapping the first product. Like for me, I was able to start with a couple $100 and buy some t-shirts, but I sold a couple, right? So like sometimes business feels like you have to have all this money and everything set up to make you win. Like in the beginning, just starting small, just like I sold 5 t-shirts to kids walking around my college. Think small in the beginning, right? Like if you put small points on the board, you're going to get people excited, right? Friends or family are going to be like, oh, I heard you're doing this. And so I think it's fine to think starting small to prove a concept. And I know that's not, in today's world, everyone's like, oh, get rich quick. And I see all these influencers, everyone's balling. It's not the case, right? It's like, start tiny, like use the money you have or go to friends and family and do all you can to just create some type of base on your business that shows a hint of success. Because once you show a hint of success, or people can point to like, oh, you made that and 10 people bought it and they like it, or I bought one and it's actually really good. Once you just have that little piece of success, that's when you open up the friends and family round, right? Or people are like, oh, I know this kid, but he's doing something that's kind of cool and he needs, $1,000, right? So I'm a complete believer of it's fine to start small. You don't need to start out massive. You look at all the big commercials, right? Like this, Google started in the garage or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
That's really where it starts. And I think the world of today has put it in our minds that we got to start day one balling and like look legit. Nah, like it's cool to show up at the trade show with a haunted house wall, like, cause I did it and it worked. So like, right concept, right idea. And I understand it doesn't work for everyone and someone might need 20 grand to make their product, but in the end, put little points on the board, because that's all we look at as investors. We look at little moments of success. We don't, because if you're successful, you're not going to sell us anything, right? Or if you're already cranking, then there's no investment opportunity. So just show a glimpse of success would be my advice.
Right. Two final questions. If you could go back and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell him?
I would.
What advice would you give him?
My 18-year-old self, I'd say buckle up. It's about to get fun and exciting. And then the advice I'd give myself is learn to trust others and put together, it's all about team. I would just be like, delegate and find out your weaknesses as fast as you can and find people that their strength is your weakness and never lose sight of them ever.
That's great advice. And finally, what's the best piece of business advice you've ever gotten?
Wow, probably, I've gotten so much, probably to that point. Crazy story. I was friends with the Miller family, Larry H. Miller, who owned the Utah Jazz, all the car things. And it goes back to the advice I just gave. I was sitting in his kitchen with his son, Zane, and he passed away probably 3 weeks after this. So he was already like run down off diabetes, not taking care of himself. He literally like didn't even take his, insulin because he thought it was inefficient, right, to his productivity and how hard he was working. And he gave me the advice, 2 things, right? He said, family's the most important thing, no matter what you do. So keep that on the tracks. And then number 2, learn how to trust others and let them do what they do. Because if not, you're going to run around crazy like I did, micromanaging for so many years, that it ends up hurting you.
Wow, what a great story. And you know what? I got a connection to Larry Miller. I was, without getting into my whole story, I was all fucked up in my 20s. I just got sober. I'm living in a clean and sober house in Phoenix, Arizona.
Wow.
I got like $50 to my name, no car, no license, no nothing.
Wow.
So I rode my bicycle to Scott Toyota, which turned out to be a Larry Miller dealership, one of the ones he owned, and got a job there. And within like 2 months became the #1 guy. And I was #1 every month from there on out. Got money in my pocket, got my own place, got another job.
That's
Kind of went from
amazing.
there, but it all started at a little Larry Miller store in Arizona.
Yo, I love that. Shout out to Larry Miller.
Shout out to the Larry Miller group. So anyway, brother, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I'm glad we finally got to do this. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. New interviews every Tuesday. And if you can't watch the interviews, make sure you listen to the interviews on podcasts, wherever podcasts are available. So thanks so much for watching, guys. And thanks, brother.
Later, bro.